During the time I was sick, after the first 3 or 4 days, I had a chance to read the entire New York Times, which I haven't done in a long time. I came across an article on last Tuesday that, as sick as well, actually I read it on Wednesday because I was sick as hell on Tuesday, but I think I read it Wednesday night, and it scared the hell out of me. The headline is enough to be scary. The headline was, "Christian nationalists are excited about what comes next." Huh? Now, I talked to our education affairs superintendent during my sickness, so I didn't talk to her. I texted with her, Kay, on the West Coast. And I told her, Kay, from here on out, I'm not going to refer to them as Christian fascists anymore. It's kind of ridiculous. They are Christian terrorists. Christian terrorists. They're not Christian nationalists. They are terrorists, as these Christian extremists have been for the past 1,800 years. They are Christian terrorists. So that's what I'm addressing with this piece. The writer, a woman named Catherine Stewart, has been writing about the religious right for more than a decade, and she's the author of a book entitled "The Power Worshippers Inside the Dangerous Rise of Religious Nationalism." I know I've been harping on this subject for an awfully long time, but that's because I know, I observe, I see what's happening, and I'm sure you do too, and I just think it's important to keep talking about it. But she points out that the shape, and I'm going to use my own terminology here. She calls it Christian nationalism. I now call it Christian terrorism. But the shape of Christian terrorism, that whole movement, now that Roe v. Wade has been destroyed by these bastards, is starting to come into view. And she says it should terrify anyone concerned about the future of constitutional democracy. How's that for a pretty direct statement, huh? It should terrify anyone concerned about the future of constitutional democracy. She points out what we know, because we've lived through it now, the Supreme Court's decision to rescind the rights of American women, reproductive rights, and their privacy, that they've had over the past 50 years, reproductive privacy, will not lead America's religious terrorists to retire from the culture wars. I mean, a lot of people think, okay, they got what they wanted, so maybe the bastards will pack their tents and go home. No, they won't, to enjoy the little moment of triumph. To the contrary, these leaders, the Christian terrorist leaders, are already getting ready for a new and more direct and brutal assault on individual rights and on democratic self-governance. Remember, democratic self-governance is not able to coexist with Christian terrorism or Christianity to begin with, even though Jesus said, "Render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's and unto God that which is God," blah, blah, blah. These Christian terrorists don't believe that shit any more than they believe in Jesus. They don't believe in Jesus. He was a punk to them. They believe in the kind of fascist bullshit personified in Donald Trump, but I digress. And yes, I'm going to have to stop periodically like that and cough. Breaking, shattering American democracy is not an unintended side effect of Christian terrorism. It's the point of Christian terrorism. This is what they are about, to destroy American democracy. I think people who listen to this podcast and I are on the same page as far as that's concerned. But anyway, Ms. Stewart writes this: "A good place to gauge the spirit and intentions of the movement that brought us the radical majority on the Supreme Court is the annual Road to Majority Policy Conference." Now, this year's event took place last month in June in Nashville. And at that conference, she reports that there were 3 clear trends that were evident to anyone who was paying attention. First, is the rhetoric of violence among the leaders of the Christian terrorist movement. And at this conference, that rhetoric of violence appears to have increased significantly from the already insane levels that our writer here, Catherine Stewart, says she has observed in previous years. So that's number one. Number two, the theology of so-called Dominionism. And that is the belief that properly thinking Christians have a biblically derived mandate to take control of all aspects of government and society. Hence the word Dominionism. And that term, that theology of Dominionism, is now explicitly embraced by the Christian terrorists. And then third, the key strategists of the Christian terrorist movement in this country were just happy as hell about the legal arsenal that the Supreme Court has now laid at their feet while they were enjoying the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And the Christian terrorists intend to use that arsenal together with additional weaponry collected in cases like there was one called Carson versus Macon, which requires state funding of religious schools if private secular schools are also being funded. So there goes that aspect of separation of church and state. Also, there was a case, Kennedy versus Bremerton School District. And that's one where a religious nutfuck can pray in the middle of a football field, the football coach, and force his players to join him in Christian prayer. They're not praying to any deity other than the one they've made up, Jesus Christ. And also, this is just part of the arsenal that the Supreme Court is handing these people now to prosecute a war on individual rights. And not just in state legislatures where a lot of this deviltry is going on, but also throughout the nation. Ms. Stewart writes this, quote, although metaphors of battle are common enough in political gatherings, this year's rhetoric at this conference appeared more violent, more graphic, and more tightly focused on fellow Americans rather than on geopolitical foes. In other words, what she's saying is at this conference, this so-called Road to Majority policy conference, the enemy now is not people outside this country. It's not communism or fascism or thisism or thatism. It's fellow Americans who don't believe this fucking bullshit, this fascist Christianity, this Christian terrorism. The Orange Vomit delivered the keynote address at this event, of course. And according to Catherine, he said, quote, the greatest danger to America is not our enemies from the outside, as powerful as they may be. The greatest danger to America is the destruction of our nation from the people from within. And you know the people I'm talking about, end quote. Now, the problem here is these Christian terrorists always borrow language from people who have worked for civil rights, like Dr. King, for people who have worked for equality under law. And they take the language and twist it to their own means. They completely invert it. Exactly what Orwell talked about in his novel 1984, the destruction of language and replacing the accepted meanings and definitions of language with whatever Big Brother says it should be. And that's what's going on. At this conference that I mentioned to you, the annual Road to Majority Policy Conference, according to Catherine, speakers tried to outdo each other in their denigration of the people that the Orange Vomit was evidently talking about. Speakers said Democrats are evil, tyrannical, the enemy within, and engaged in a war against the truth. I mean, God damn. Democrats are engaged in a war against the truth when the biggest fucking liar in the history of this republic is the one leading this movement, Donald Trump. This is madness. And then you have the sick fuck Rick Scott of Florida, senator of Florida, who should be in prison for the scam that he ran when he had a health insurance company. He was just a fucking thief. But he spoke and he said, quote, "The backlash is coming. Just mount up and ride to the sounds of the guns. And they're all over this country. It's time to take this country back." You hear what these bastards are advocating. Armed insurrection, violence. And you wonder, I know you don't, but someone may wonder why I refer to them as Christian terrorists. That's exactly what they are. Then you have Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson of North Carolina. And this rat fucker used the fight against the Nazis during the Battle of the Bulge. In his example, this is what he said, quote, "We find ourselves in a pitched battle to literally save this nation. I don't know about you, but I've got my pack on, I've got my boots on, I got my helmet on, I've got on the whole armor." And he was referring to a passage from the book of Ephesians in the Bible that Christian fascists often use to signal their militancy. You know, this idea of a pitched battle to literally save this nation, when what they mean is they want to destroy it. So, as Catherine points out, you don't have to stretch to link this rise in verbal militancy, verbal aggression, and violence, link it to the disinformation campaign of the disinformation campaign that is being used to indoctrinate the Christian terrorist base. And that is the lie that the 2020 election was stolen. That's at the foundation of all this. So this movement, this Christian terrorist movement, is preparing what they call patriots. Can you fucking believe this? For the continuation of their assault on democracy coming up this November and then in November 2024. We are really heading for a brick wall, aren't we? A bad one. Yeah, I know. I've talked and talked and talked about this, not just on this podcast. I've been talking about Christian fascism for a number of years, once I saw that it was really, really happening, that the Christian right was no longer that. It had morphed into Christian fascism, and now it's morphed into Christian terrorism. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcast. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.